two are so essential right now.
So exciting to be here.
I couldn't be happier, honestly, when you asked me to moderate this, because it's a book that I've been so excited to read. And I have to say, you look at the title, Democracy in Retrograde, and you're like, oh my God, it is, huh? And so I think for that reason, and for so many others, including press conferences that may or may not be happening right now, everyone, I think, should just start by going, so let's just do one together. And my poor boyfriend knows I make him do this at home. So inhale. Okay, I feel like slightly better.
We could do like a few more of those, but we have tough stuff to talk about.
We have stuff to talk about. But before we have stuff to talk about, I want you guys to spend maybe a minute each looking at someone who you did not come here with that's still seated in your area. And I want you to answer one question. If you could tell the person that you're about to talk to one politician that you would like to have dinner with, and why?
Dead or alive.
I will tell you at the 1 minute mark when you can switch.
Make community. Let's create those fabric of a society that we need. Don't talk to someone next to you. Go this way. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
1 minute on the clock.
A lot. Everyone says that. What would you tell her? Retire sooner? Oh, really? Retire sooner? I have like a bot that I could enjoy. Like George Santos? They're so like. I don't do like a George Washington. I want to know like the OG.
I think like Reagan could be cool. Yeah. Would it be like, did you anticipate this? Like, It's been about a minute, so if you're making your case, let the partner make the case.
Okay. You guys, we are up here debating whether you want to talk to a hero or a villain, like it's an episode of Survivor.
Yeah. Who likes to talk to a hero?
Okay, who likes to talk to a hero? Raise your hand. Heroes, who wanted to talk to a villain?
No villains?
No villains?
Villain. Who do you want to, of course, yeah. Who do you want to talk to?
Okay.
Right, see?
The classic move, the classic move.
We were at like Nixon, but.
Yeah. George Santos.
G.
Yeah. What did everyone else say? Shout out your answers. Who?
Biden. Warren.
I can't hear.
That would be a good meal, having done it.
Whitmer,
Okay.
you could probably meet her,
That's
I'm
a
sure.
score, I don't know it.
Yeah.
Frances Perkins?
She.
That's a great one. First Labor Department secretary, who was a first woman secretary, Labor Department. Yes.
Okay.
That's a great one.
That's a good one.
And what thinking? How did you do that? How'd you pull it off? Give us some clues.
I'm glad we had that moment to build community, because it's such a central part of the book that you guys write and the ways that I think life just kind of tends to silo us off a little bit, and that chokes off our ability to spur democracy. And so I think just as we kick things off here, you know, is it possible to activate, to energize, to vote our way out of these present circumstances? Sammy and then Emily.
This is a classic.
Then Emily and then Sammy.
Yeah. For
Mike Travel.
the mic drama. So I think there's 2 answers to that question. It's not working. I'll project. We can share. Ooh, very loud.
Community.
There is a very serious case of apathy in this country. And what we are trying to do with this book is say, like, there's so many things we can do to fight apathy. There's so many ways to find joy in this work. And at the end of the day, you know, what, like, for human beings, what keeps you coming back to anything in life is finding joy, finding fulfillment, making it a cup-filling exercise. And I think there's so many different options in civic life, and it's for sure on the table. It's also like, what other choice do we have? We have to do it.
I was gonna, well, we'll see how this goes.
Go
Hopefully.
head on.
Head on, head on. That's how you should face your problems. It's like a metaphor. I thought you were going to say my favorite quote of yours, which is that we are in a political problem, and that means it has a political solution. And we can fundamentally, you're like, oh, that was a good quote, I said. Really, it's not, the thing is, yes, we can vote our way out of it, but it's not going to take one election. It's going to take every election for the rest of forever. And it's also not going to take like the 70% turnout, which is the highest we've ever had. It's going to take sustained turnout of 80, 85, 90% plus. And that is how we hold our elected officials accountable in the long term, so that we don't have to be monitoring them all the time, because they will be more reflective of who we are. The other thing is that we're not screwed, and you can get out of a dictatorship. Other countries have done it. Like, look at Germany.
Taking a real step.
I'm serious.
Just
like,
go with
We
it.
are 10 minutes in.
no, just, but for real, now, if you deny the Holocaust in Germany, it's like off with your head. Not really, because they're a democracy, you know. But for real, like, it's not just, history is a pendulum. You know, I feel like we all sort of understand that. And it just because we are in a situation now does not mean that we can't pull ourselves back from the brink again and again and again. But it will happen faster and more smoothly if everyone is involved at scale. And that's a really hard thing to do, but that's why we have to all evangelize this message to
But
do
we're
it.
not there yet.
We're not even close.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's early enough in the process that I'm glad actually about the timing of this book, because long have I heard the White House and other campaigns make the argument that the reason that you're seeing people, when I go out to talk to voters, when people get called for polls, they say, well, I'm not really paying attention yet. And so for people who might just be tuning in, and I think we have the benefit of being in DC, where we're all civically engaged a little bit more than your average bear, maybe forcibly so, because you live a few blocks from the Capitol, or you live a few blocks from the White House, or the NATO traffic stops you from getting to work. But for people who are already inclined to be engaged, what's the next step that they can take here in July when you're heading into a season with such high stakes?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, we have, you know, in the book, there's when you get it, turn to page 91 and take the civic personality quiz, find out your civic personality, and then within each personality, we have different suggestions for how you can get more engaged. And again, we're assuming that many people in this room are probably already highly engaged and have jobs that are reflective of this and are pretty well informed. But a lot of organizing feels like, you know, I'm checking the box, or I'm, you know, doing my vote, and I'm, you know, I'm phone banking, or I'm letter writing, and that is all amazing, and we absolutely need that. We need more of that, not less of that. But I think something that gets lost in this is the like social piece and the culture of civic engagement, and the culture of us all looking at ourselves as having a relationship to the collective, the way we have a relationship, you know, we are siblings, we are parents, we are spouses, we're friends, we're coworkers, but people don't really think about themselves as like, what is my role as a citizen, and what is owed to me, and what do we owe each other just because we merely coexist here. And that is really what a civically engaged society looks like, when people are in community with each other in a real way, figuring out how to solve problems. And I think the extremism that we see now and the polarization is a sign of a lack of engagement, because ultimately what has happened is the people who are on these extreme wings have taken over the discourse. And all, you know, in the book we call it the exhausted majority, which is 67% of Americans. And those are the people who are just tired of the polarization and the extremism and these ideologically led campaigns. And when those people are silent or scared away from the conversation, that's when the extremism takes, hold in that vacuum. So what we want to do is encourage people to fill that space with sane, nuanced, it doesn't have to be moderate ideologically, but nuanced and, conversation with each other, trying to reach consensus and compromise and, understand each other more.
You worked in a building that I don't hear the word compromise or consensus often. I mean, coming from a place like the Senate that is such an institution and applying the lessons that you've learned from being there into now telling folks, here's how you get engaged, here's how you actually impact change, what would you tell people?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the Senate before the current era of full and total ineptitude. Right, like we were still passing laws, which they are not doing anymore. And so there was compromise. I mean, the system of the Senate is set up for compromise to force it with the filibuster. Though one of the things we talk about in the appendix, I think, is like the filibuster is a rule that's made up, and it's a rule that can be changed. And like everything in the government is a rule that was made up and a rule that can be changed. The entire legal system that we have is a series of laws and then an entire system set up to change them, to change the interpretation of the Constitution through every single decision those judges make. So I think so often people think of all of this as like stagnant and immutable, but the very nature of the entire thing is set up to change. And so that's, I think that like, for me, because I've been doing this work for so long, for 20 years vocationally, and I've had enough time to work on things where I see beginning to end. And I see people come around, and at first everyone's objecting, and then they come around to it. I think it has given me a belief that things are possible. And that's one of the reasons we talk a lot about getting involved in local stuff more. Because if you want to get involved in one of these like very intractable issues that are up at the Supreme Court litigation and constitutional interpretation and all of this stuff, it's very, very hard to see the end, both literally and metaphorically. Like it's hard to see how we end up at the end. But if you like want to get a speed bump put on your street, you can engage in advocacy over the course of the year and succeed. And then you get to see the physical manifestation of your work. And there's this sense of change and action, and it begins the process for you. And I think we always see this whole thing as building. But to take a step back, that was an Emily tangent. But I think like the question here was like, how do you start? Whenever anyone asks me how do you start, I always say, start a book club. And my book club girlies are here from my personal book club, woohoo, supporting me. And because, when we talk about politics, there's so much strife. There's so much, it's about other people. And like politics is us. We are it. That's the whole thing. And book clubs are about meeting people in your community and getting together, talking about things. At my book club, we talk about the book for like 10 minutes. Maybe, like, I don't read them half the time. Because if it's a romance book,
That's not an eldest daughter trait.
Well, I'm not an eldest daughter. I'm an only child, which means I do what I want when I want.
The eldest daughters have no idea what's going on.
No, absolutely not. I only read my murder mystery books. But we are doing this book, and I have read it. So they were all obligated to do this. They couldn't say no.
Read it a few times.
Yeah, I've read it a few times. But, I think that, like, when people think about getting politically engaged, and again, we know in the context of this room, but I imagine everyone in this room also has conversations with other people who are like, I don't know about getting politically engaged, And I think that one of the big things is we want to reframe what being politically engaged, what civically engaged means, and it's so much more than like cold calling someone about GOTV. It's definitely so much more than like screaming at your uncle across the dinner table, right? Like those are not necessarily the world's most productive things, but in fact, like sitting around a living room sectional, talking to your neighbors, building relationships, talking about your values, talking about things you care about in your community, that is very much like the foundation of both community life, civic life, and our political life.
But I also think one of the things that's hard about talking about politics right now, as someone who does it like you guys do all the time, is it feels very fraught to engage. So how do you start that conversation when you know that your uncle across the table, maybe you don't want to yell at him, but you know you're not starting from the same place? How do you start?
Yeah, don't talk to him.
Honestly, yeah.
Talk to his friend, but we have plenty of people who aren't our crazy uncles,
Right.
but who want to talk about this stuff and maybe are persuadable.
I would say, like, it's not worth engaging with people who are there for a fight, or who are so, like, down the rabbit hole that engaging with them is only going to harm your relationship, and then it won't be there if they ever wake up from whatever crazy shit they believe. So, so I would not spend your energy on that. That's only going to make you more angry. Instead, I would focus on speaking honestly and openly and candidly, and not necessarily from a persuasive standpoint, to the people around you who might not be engaged at all or might not be aware of the fact that their circumstances are the results of politics. Like, if you have a friend who's going through fertility issues or something like that, I think that's like a very relevant example for our age group, is, that is a political situation. And I think that that is honestly, like, I've witnessed a lot of people who come to understand politics through that experience of having to navigate that system, having to navigate insurance. And I think that, and I mean, what we say in the book, and I find this to be one of the most inspiring and interesting things, is that the most effective way to get out the vote and to change people's minds is literally by having conversations with just trusted confidants. People see things from a different perspective, the way that you would talk about anything with a friend. So
we had an event in Philadelphia 2 nights ago. I've a little bit lost track of time. But someone sent me a DM afterwards, and they were like, I was too shy to come talk to you. And I was like, well, I'm very approachable, so I don't understand that. But she was like, I was too shy to come talk to you. But my husband and I went out to dinner afterwards, and I heard the two women at the table next to me talking about how they felt so much despair over the current political context. And I had your book with me, and I started talking to them about your book, and I gave them your book. She said, I'm going to buy another copy. And I was like, thanks. You know what I want to hear. And that she was like, and we started this conversation, and I never thought that I would be the type of person that would have this conversation, but it just, I felt empowered to start. And, I always talk about how I'm like constantly talking to people about politics. My friends are in the room know I like never stop. One of the most annoying things I do at book club is I like have the same questions I ask every time. I'm like, everyone give me their opinion on like this politician and this politician.
It's polling.
It's polling. I literally do
focus groups.
My life is just a focus group that I run for my own edutainment.
There's a lot of money. If everyone here knows, there's a lot of money in this system, and it's not going to the right people.
I need to commoditize my brain.
I think it should go to her, if anyone has any power over that.
Yeah, if anyone knows.
There must be someone.
But, I think that, like, so much of the current discourse is conversations started by people who are going into an argument, not a conversation. And there's all these people out there in the universe who want to have conversations, and we just need to be the ones to start those conversations. In the book, we do have a list of like conversation enders. When you're
starters.
And starters. But like when you're in an antagonistic conversation, you're just like
hatch
you're just like an escape hatch. How to like get out of it, how to de-escalate the whole situation. Because like it's a real thing that exists and people find very bothersome, and I'm like, forget it. Forget those people. You don't need to waste your energy on those people. There's so many other people out there who do need your energy.
I wonder, and you guys talk about this in the book, the role that storytelling can play in making people either aware of the fact that politics is directly impacting their lives, or bringing conversations potentially like the one that your reader who like, oh my God, unicorn reader.
No, they're all like that.
The person who I needed them 2 years ago for mine. but
we're
truly,
gonna
like,
talk about that.
The idea that this woman could go up to a table of strangers and say, here, this is a story about a book that I just read that I think could work for you. it strikes me, as you guys think about storytelling as a mechanism, what politicians, what issues, who has stood out as a story that can transcend politics, that makes people perk up and say, oh, I'm not just listening to a Democrat because I'm a Democrat or Republican because I'm a Republican. This is a story that makes me think of an issue in a new way, as impactful to me, and it's not red versus blue.
I think, you know, a lot of people in the gun advocacy space or gun safety advocacy space, not the gun advocacy space, you know, I think of Shannon Watts and I think of the Parkland No Longer Children. Go on to call them the Parkland kids, but they have really transcended that. And I think there was, you know, I was in 4th grade when Columbine happened, and that was a big, big moment. But there were always, like, you know, now I think there are a lot of really tragic situations that go, but so Americans have become really almost inoculated against, you know, tragic mass shootings. But there were a few moments, you know, I remember Sandy Hook was one of these moments, and Parkland, where certain situations, Aurora, were like really, really galvanizing for people. And the way that people told those stories, and the way that it got them on their path to engagement, I think is a great example of how that happens. And you see it now with like Amanda Zorowski and Kate Cox in Texas. You know, just
Talking
regular
about
people who, with just regular people who something bad happens to them and they're like, oh, this is a policy failure, not an accident. And I think that that's something that we can all learn from, even absent tragedy.
What sticks out to you?
Well, I actually sort of want to flip the question on its head a little bit because, you know, I think for anyone
I love it when politicians do that to me.
at least I'm admitting it. I'm going to answer the question that I want to answer. Is
You're perfect.
wanna
Answer
know-
whatever you
That's
want.
what I was just saying.
Like the only child.
Like someone who's worked in politics for 20 years. You know, I think, you know, so many of us who work vocationally in politics, you know, use of narrative is a key tactic, right? Like, we as human beings struggle to grasp large statistics, and if we are given a single human story, we are much more able to grasp a large policy issue, and this is like a central tenet of advocacy. But I think, and so many times when I'm talking to people like you who like want to talk about politics, they're like, give me the story that I should tell to convince people. And I actually think it's sort of the opposite, which is like, I think you should be asking questions to the person that you're talking to. I think that the way we approach persuasion is less about telling and more about listening, because it's about figuring out like what that person cares about and getting them to articulate it, and then to be like, that's a political issue. Oh, and then you go back, then there's like a follow-up conversation. So many, like, I don't really ever think it's like you're never gonna get someone once. Like, there's no one-hit wonder when it comes to persuasion, right? Like, which is why it's about maintaining the relationships. You then like have time to go, you do a little research, you get some information, you come back, you're like, have it in your pocket, ready for when it comes up in conversation.
DM them an article or like a tweet.
Yeah, but for literally,
No, for real.
you're like, oh my God, I saw this.
Yeah.
And like, that's the persuasion. And I think it's more subtle, and I don't think there's a world in which like a single talking point is gonna convince everyone that we need universal background checks. Like, because if there was, it would have happened.
Right, it's not like a debate competition. And that, I think, is, you know, and the only time you're going to convince someone in like one conversation is if they happen to come to you primed to be convinced because of everything that had led them there. But most likely, if you're starting with someone who's disengaged or believes the opposite of what you believe, that is going to take a bunch of conversations to sort of change the brain waves. And this is also something that we talk about in the book, that scientifically, when people are in conversation with each other, dialoguing over an issue, their brains actually sync up. And that is what it means to have, you know, consensus, to really click with somebody.
You know, but I'll also say, like, in my day-to-day life, I'm not like having political conversations where I'm convincing people to become pro-choice. You know what I mean? Like, that opportunity is not presented to me very often. Most of the time, it's like people who are just pretty apathetic and aren't tuned in, and then I can be like, oh, did you know you have a primary? You know, and like that's like enough, and they don't really need to do more. They're just not tapped in. So I also think like that's part of it, and not shaming people for not being tapped in, but just being like, I'm here. You know what I mean? Like whenever you have a question, I'm here. I mean, I think that's sort of theoretically my whole brand is like, if you have a question, I'll answer it, which is I have now scaled to this whole thing. But you know, I think that like to a significant degree, it's and I think that you know there's messaging and institutional forces in people like me who need to do a lot better arming people, and I'm going to try to do that this year, arming people with those talking points. Stay tuned. But you know, I think that that's a big one of the big hurdles we have.
I think as I look at the policy topics that I talk about a lot, that I report on a lot, and that I actually think will turn the election, to me, the one that fits with this conversation right now is abortion and reproductive access. And I think that issue has reached such an energizing point for voters, in large part because I think the way you guys are talking about it is right. A lot of these voters didn't realize they were voting on this stuff until they realized they were voting on this stuff. And as someone who is very quick to look at the gender impact of it all, I'm a sucker for that. The way
not
that
important.
men, it's not important. The way that men have felt engaged in this conversation has felt new to me as someone who's covered reproductive access for a decade. Talk about the ways that you think that men are getting engaged in this current moment. And it feels like you guys talk to predominantly women on your platforms for the most part. Have you seen a change in that?
So, I mean, I think men also don't want to have babies that they don't want to have. And I mean, there's been like a ridiculous
Or
increase,
can't,
or can't.
Can't
There's
have,
yeah,
can't carry,
yeah. There's also been a ridiculous increase in the number of vasectomies. So I don't think this is like only women think that this affects them. I think it's honestly like, I think one of the challenges is that there's so many spaces for men to go that are misogynistic and toxic, and that are not trying to turn the culture around in a way that is egalitarian or productive. And it's not like cool for a man to be a feminist. Like it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. Who's, you know, a guy who's willing to be really openly emphatic about that. But I think potentially it does seem like it is turning. I think it's like the kind of thing where eventually it will become, maybe hopefully closer to the election, more kind of necessary for men to be more open about their feminism, so to speak. But it's tough, honestly, because the system doesn't really incentivize it.
I always found it profoundly offensive that reproductive health issues, when I worked on the Hill, were a part of the women's issues portfolio. Like, as if they don't affect men. You know what I mean? Like, it's deeply offensive. As if men don't care about women dying on emergency room floors.
They're the first ones to tell you that to make a baby, you need a man and a woman. So it's just it's weird.
It's just, you know, the prospect is offensive to me, and I've never really been interested in trying to convince men to care about women. That's not what I consider one of my mantles, why I was placed on this earth. If you don't want to care about the other people who live here, that's like a you problem, not a me problem. But I think, you know, Allie, you have done a lot of work sort of studying how women are treated in politics. And you've thought about this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You wrote a book about it. Yeah.
Electable. Why America hasn't had a woman president yet.
It's a book that
is that the
all of you should buy. It's a wonderful book about a pressing, very remainingly topical issue. And I mean, do you see the way, especially in national politics, we talk about these issues? Do you see it changing?
Very much so. I do think, and maybe it's because we have more women reporters who are in these spaces and who understand what goes on in this conversation, it becomes more clear when you ask men who are legislating around it that they probably don't have much of a sense of what they're talking about. And I think that that's affirming in some ways. But I also think
embarrass
that
them.
Well, Tommy Tuberville had a very interesting answer about IVF.
The viral video has a few upsides.
Right. But I
Yeah.
do think that when you have more women in press corps, more women who are engaging in the political process, to take it back to where we are, and more ability to just talk about these issues, not as women's issues, but as just issues. And on this one, I have to say, and I say this all the time, I think Republicans consistently underestimate the power of female rage around this issue and in general, because I do think that this will be the issue that we look at that could turn an election. If it's organized around and if people are engaged on it. But that doesn't happen without women feeling comfortable in society to share their stories, to engage with their neighbors, to trust their friends in telling them about their abortion stories, and in feeling safe to share that, and in feeling safe to share when policy does them wrong on it too.
I would suggest we try to capitalize on a different emotion. I haven't seen Inside Out 2, but I am looking forward to it.
So much same.
But disgust. I think it's pretty disgusting that people actually think that they should have the right, or that the government should have the right, to talk about what goes on in the room when your feet are in the stirrups. Like, it's actually so gross when you think about how perverted it is. And I think that that is really the angle that I want to lean on, because guys don't like feeling creepy. That is one thing that they don't want to be. So I think the more we up the creep factor on all this stuff, we can maybe like humiliate, maybe we make them think that they won't, like, I don't know, get any women or something, if that's all it, you know.
Well, the other feeling
Like,
I
to make them pariahs for this, basically. Sorry.
The other
if
feeling
any
I
men.
wonder about, and we focus so much on the way that fear as an emotion is used as a tactic. You guys here take the complete opposite view of the way that, for example, Republicans are trying to capitalize on the way that older white men, for example, feel that this country is slipping away from them somehow. I will also say Democrats are adept at using fear to say your rights are being taken away from you on XYZ topic. It is a central through line in politics, and yet you guys are turning it on its head. Why should this work better?
Well, it's a short-term versus long-term thing, right? Like, fear works better to get an immediate response. It works better to get someone to watch your social media video, to engage with that social media video. I mean, as a political content creator, I can tell you, like, if I want to get really high engagement, the best way to do it is to post a video of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, it works, right? Like, posting outrage bait is very, very effective in the short term for scaring people. But I think, you know, democracy is sick, and it needs a full solution. We can't just give it like a pill here and a pill there. We need democracy to eat its broccoli, and to do all of that, we need everyone to be able to participate in it. And there's just no way, you know, you're only going to be part of what the book does is try to connect all these disparate ideas of social media, of the exhaustive majority, of all of these things. And one of the arguments we make is this, you know, one of the main things that differentiates the exhaustive majority from the people on the wings, 67% are the people in the middle, and then there's one group on the left and two groups on the right. And one of the main things that differentiates them, it's not a policy issue, it's the way they view policy. When you're on the wings, everything is a moral issue. Everything is a righteous war. And that's how you view all the political issues that you engage in. And people in the middle, they're like trying to live their lives, trying to put dinner on the table. You know, they have like a different set of opinions on lots of different things. They want reasonable, pragmatic things. What they want is the trains to run on time, their kids to be able to go to school, you know what I mean, the air to be clean, the water to be safe, and for them to be able to live their lives. And I think that so much of the discourse is aimed towards those people on the wings, and we're trying to say we want to talk to the people in the middle.
Well, that's also part of the problem with social media, is that so much of politics and political messaging and news happens on social media now, much to the dismay of Allie's employer. And
I didn't say that.
No, I said it. It's me. You know, and part of the problem is that the algorithms do incentivize fear. So you're not going to have like these nuanced conversations, and you then get the impression that nobody is. And that's why we advocate so much for in-person conversations and for real life relationships, and that being tethered to other people, to the humanity of people who are different than us, from the way that our choices and our rhetoric affects what might happen, I think that is what's really, really important. And fear does not really, validating fear is good, but stoking fear is actually, it might get you views or even votes, but in the long term, it's not going to build an engaged citizenry.
We're going to keep talking for a few more minutes, and then as I burn my retinas on these lights, I'm looking at the clock. We will have about 20 minutes at the end for any of you guys who would like to engage in the conversation with us. We can talk book topics, we can talk news of day, we can talk whatever, but just keep that in mind as your mind is marinating, and someone right there, perfect, will come around with a microphone in about 5 minutes. But I guess as we're having this conversation, I think one of the things as we think about media and social media is that's also where people are. So, okay, if you're not in person and you can't get to a book club, and we're in a place where we're dealing with a loneliness epidemic where people feel disconnected, they can't physically be together. The pandemic certainly illuminated this. Where should people gather?
So, I mean, the irony of this is that Emily and I actually met on social media. So
I
we're
think
not
all of us
yeah.
met online.
Yeah,
well, you and I met at a book talk, which actually proves
Look
the
at
premise.
that.
But
Right. And it's not that relationships made on social media are bad or they don't count. It's that we're advocating for people to be intentional about that. You can meet friends on social media and turn it into a great relationship or a friendship, but it's more about not having that as a substitute for these real life relationships. Something else we talk about in the book is that as we're, social media is the public square now, but the public square in past centuries has been a real place where people go and they interact with people who they've never seen, just who they live in proximity to, and you have access to social services like the library or a park or, a post office, all these things that sort of make up the public infrastructure of a town and a local economy. These things I think are kind of taken for granted because we can now, get Amazon sent to us wherever we are mostly.
this
Until
book
they
is available
screw
on
up.
Amazon.
Yes, until they screw up the post office, then then it's a question. Also a political problem. But yeah, I mean, it's these loss of these third spaces, the loss of libraries, the loss of, the car culture, all of these things have weakened our public bonds. And this is really part of what we're trying to cultivate is, reversing that trend as well. And we say that we believe this is part of curing democracy.
For people who have read the book, a big part of the book is like a series of essentially exercises, worksheets. And the first one is auditing your news diet. And I take that very seriously. I try very hard to make sure that I'm not consuming news that makes me go bonkers. And I think that a lot of people have an experience where they doom scroll, tap out, come back 2 months later, doom scroll, tap out. And it's not a healthy way to consume, it's not a sustainable way. And it's not a way that is good for maintaining yourself as an informed citizen. And so that's why we really have that at the outset. I mean, all of you are here, conceivably you have an interest in social media. You probably found out about this on social media, right? I think there's lots of good things that happen on social media. I think it's the most amazing public square ever. I think it's about figuring out who you're following with intentionality and, having more public conversations and helping people figure out how to curate that. And we're trying to do that with the book.
Can I ask selfishly, because I do ask a lot of my friends this, what do you read? What do you watch for news? And do you do it in the morning? I mean, you text me when I'm on TV, so yes, I know.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So for each of you, what are they?
I will say I watch a lot of MSNBC, but honestly, that's
Very
where
good
it's just the best. It's just, I'm getting, people want to smear it, but you're getting really intellectual analysis there. I'm actually not getting most of my headlines from there because a lot of what's going on there is just talking about stuff I agree with, which I love. But, I do the morning announcements every night. So I'm reading, I go to WashingtonPost.com, APnews.com, Axios.com, and I read, several more. And I read all of those front pages every night. I'm looking on Twitter, I'm looking on Threads, but really I'm getting it from the the front pages. And I'm, as time has gone on, I'm trying to like synthesize it more rather than just kind of like read the headlines, but I'm like reading the reporting. So that is.
While Emily answers, you guys can start to queue up if you have questions.
Ooh, we're doing a cute. Can we do our question first, Sally?
Of course we can.
For the audience?
Keep your. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I want to do one more kibitz.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. While people think of their questions.
While
yeah.
you think of your questions, I'll answer really quickly and then I'll do it. My answer is I never watch television. I never watch television news. I don't subscribe to cable. If there's like a State of the Union, I watch it on the internet. So I only.
It's okay. We have streaming. You're good.
But
The
NBC is
MSNBC
now on
app.
socials, so I follow the socials and I get the clips. I get my new congressional news from Punchbowl. I get my national news and my New York news from my former days of caring about New York State from New York Times. And then I consume news via social media in lots and lots of different ways. But and I also get a lot of newsletters, both Substacks from individual authors and like the Daily 202, the Daily Punch, all of the various newsletters, but they have sort of get overwhelming. I have like thousands of them in my inbox. But yeah, so I think that for me, it's also about like some days I can't consume it all, and I just let myself not do it. It's okay.
Yeah, that's how I spend Saturdays typically. Just decompress day.
Yeah.
Because we're all about keeping our mutual conversations going too, right before questions, we have one more that you can turn back to the new friend that you just made, right?
Yeah, or find a new
Or
friend.
find a new friend.
We have a question.
Or combine groups,
a
like
topic.
a coalition.
One of the things I love to talk about is influence. Everything we're talking about with political persuasion, it's about influencing people to care about what you care about. But we want you to talk about one thing you've been influenced to buy or do that you love, and one thing that you've been influenced to buy or do that you regret. I will say I regret those AG greens that all the influencers are always
I like
shilling.
those.
That's my regret.
I do not know what that is.
AG1.
AG1,
Athletic
those greens.
I actually like it.
Do
It's
you?
because I
horrible.
need something fast that doesn't take me like.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's, this is the thing. Trust is being destroyed. I'm not convinced it's actually greens anymore.
I don't know if it is
See,
either,
because
but
I've
it
seen
makes me
TikTok
think it is.
saying it's not real.
might be
It's
right.
destroyed truth is no longer real. Anyhow, discuss amongst yourselves. We'll tap back in and then do Q&A.
I have something too. What's your down? It influenced me to buy the new face.
I love mine.
Does it? It makes me feel like I'm tasting metal.
I love the new face.
Do you think it works?
Yes. It looks great. You look great. Thank you.
I mean, you look great, but I wouldn't know that I did it too.
And
It
red
didn't.
light therapy masks.
Are those real?
They're amazing.
I feel like it was like, I feel like weird using it. I'm like, is this gonna hurt me?
They're amazing. I love them. They're amazing.
Should I keep doing it? I used it. Can you tell?
Every single day.
You have to use it every day.
Yes. Red light in the morning, new face at night.
You look great. I mean,
Thank
but
you,
like you
but-
could also just look great because like.
I guess so, but just keeping track of time for them. Yeah. Yeah.
How long has it been?
You what? What's
He
happening?
says, I'm in this to complete the job I started. I'm in this to complete the job. He just started.
What do you mean?
He started at like 7:30.
You're lying.
No,
You're kidding.
he was not on till like 7:30. He says he's in it to complete the job he started. You mean the presidency?
Yeah, he didn't go on till 7.
President, that's why I transferred. Okay, so we're getting somewhere.
No, I have nothing to plug.
Elect.
Thank you. Yeah, we can do follows at the end.
Yeah, we'll do. Should we call them back?
Okay, everybody, calling you back in. Let's do,
Guess what? You can be friends with everyone after because you all live in the same city.
get it.
You made friends. Look,
were-
leave you all wanting more.
I was originally thinking like if we could separate seating based on quadrant that you live in DC. And like then I went off the deep end, and I was like, no, Emily, be cool, be a
Suddenly
be a
they're
cool
like jets and sharks, northeast and southeast.
In the future, I think we should do like mini civic engagement parties, and then people should sort themselves by their civic personality. But that's just an idea for later.
This is like the Harry Potter sorting hat situation.
You get like a cap that says "Preachy Females in Democratic Politics."
No,
I have one.
No, we are gonna do a cap that says "Civic Slut," though.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I love it.
Wear
I
it.
love
that
Wear it
too.
to your school board meeting.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Well, I've had some
So-
other ideas too, but they're less appropriate for the MLK library
So,
here.
so
Like
as we
what?
as we muse on our merch, we're gonna take some questions in the last 10 minutes. So we've got one standing right there.
Hey there. Thank you so much for being here and doing all that you do to contribute. I walked in a little bit late on the conversation, so, and I want to preface myself, I'm not here to be a contrarian. I'm truly interested in the questions I'm about to ask. I'm not really taking a position. So I walked in when you were talking about abandoning conversations with people that appear to be too extreme or you can't get anywhere with. I'm 61 years old. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. I grew up in a trailer with no running water. The town is where the Osage Reign of Terror occurred, and 45 minutes away, the Tulsa Massacre occurred. I was fortunate enough to make my way to Washington, D.C., and I've been a trial attorney here for 35 years. At 61 years old, I stay in touch with all those people in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, who are mostly very, very, very far right. And I do engage with them on Facebook. And I've doubted myself over and over again, but I don't want to give up on any of humanity. I believe everyone is worth having a conversation with. And even though I've been treated horribly, and sometimes I've gone low when I wish I wouldn't have gone low, but we still continue to dialogue. And I think there is some value in that. So I will add, I wonder if that is a generational thing, because I am 61, and a lot of our generation might be a little bit further right. I also went back to school recently after practicing law for 35 years, and I just completed a master's degree in social entrepreneurship and change. I'm here for another probably 30 years to contribute. Not take space from the younger generation, but I do plan to be an abundant resource and not a liability.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you're looking at these issues in any way cross-generationally, and what you think about, I know I'm throwing so much out here.
No.
and-
I think honestly, like
Great questions.
social media conversations and arguments, I think live in a different realm than like when you're face to face with a family member or a friend or someone who you're actually having like a challenging conversation with. Because I think part of the issue with, and I've been in many Facebook group arguments, not in a long time though, because I swore off of them, is that they're not. People will say things to each other online that they would never say to their face, and that I think only hurts people. And we've all, like you said, we've all done it. We've all gone low. If you find that having conversations with the people from your hometown is effective, and you think you're changing people's minds, or you're getting feedback that you've changed someone's perspective, then that's great. And I think your own circumstances and your own peers better than we can. We're just trying to really save people from destroying relationships that they don't want to destroy. And to your point about the generational aspect of it, I do think that it's not about like people being more right or left in a different generation. I think it's actually that different generations have different tolerance for how much they will engage with people they disagree with. And that's why I think you see like people who are older often are like, well, we have to be able to have a conversation. And then you have younger people who are like, well, not if you're a racist. And and it's like, yeah, it's okay, what is the definition? How are you ever going to get somewhere? And I think that younger generations maybe just have a bit, less trust in people who are just trying, they see them as trying to
Bait them.
excuse really abhorrent things that can't be excused. And so, I think everyone kind of knows their own situation and peers. Absolutely.
I think that's 100% right. Wait.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get you next.
Hi.
Yes. You just pass it
Um,
after.
I'm wondering, I'm a citizen of DC, and I assume most people here are too. I find, I try to have like the public square things with people, but being that we do not have a representative that can vote at the national level, and that otherwise we're pretty blue, sometimes I feel like I can't make like that local impact or that national impact. So do you guys have advice for like DC citizens specifically?
Yeah, my advice for DC citizens is always to engage in public square stuff. So posting online, talking to people. You probably know people who live out of DC, and building the public conversation. I also think there's all the sort of social stuff we were talking about, building the civic fabric. And I was just talking to someone today who was starting a bingo league. And I was like, okay, Sammy and I know someone in New York who has
Backgammon
a
club.
backgammon club. And I think that this is really starting to pop up. I think we're sort of swinging back, like we went online too far, and everyone's realizing, like, well, that wasn't fun. And so now we're swinging back to have more IRL. While you guys were talking, I was looking at my DMs. Someone just DM'd me asking for a pickleball league recommendation. And I was like, I don't know what about me says. She knows. She knows where the pickleball. I definitely don't. I get a lot of questions that I'm like, I have no idea. That's for Google.
But local Facebook group.
Yeah, local Facebook group. But I think there's like a lot of different things. Like calling your reps is not the singular civic action.
Hi, my name is Amanda McCulloch. I am a data visualization designer based in DC. So I love all the points about all the really interesting work on how we connect with stories more than stats. I think there's also a dark side to that too, in terms of the speed at which stories spread. I've had the personal experience of having the loss of my son be misrepresented by anti-vaxxers and seeing how that can move through a space very, very, very quickly and rain terror back upon people in some of their darkest hours. And so as you've talked about the importance of stories and storytelling, as well as the importance of being thoughtful about how we continue to follow up and share information with people, I think we can be quick to share those kind of stories without validating what they look like. And I wonder if you can speak to some of the ways in which people can be responsible consumers of news and media and how they share those stories, because they can be so much stickier than big numbers or statistics or data. And I say that as someone who builds charts and graphs and loves them.
I do love data visualization. That's like, I love that. Okay. It's more interesting than
Come
the
join the
numbers
Data Viz
themselves.
Society.
Okay, I'll follow you on Instagram. All your visuals are. Yeah, I think that we acknowledge that in the book, that when people lean too much on these anecdotes and lean too much on like, well, in my experience, like you're not getting a representative situation necessarily, and you're also leaning heavily on emotion rather than like facts and reality. And to what you're saying is actually one of my biggest fears around this election is that stories like that will be spread, whether intentionally, intentional misinformation or not. And I mean, I would say like the biggest thing that I've been doing, as I see so many like fake accounts and so much fake commentary pop up on all these platforms, is really like looking at who's speaking, like looking at their profile, seeing if it's real, blocking anyone who is not, blocking any accounts that are not real on your page. But it's like, it's a losing battle. It's like whack-a-mole.
They don't make it easy.
They
I
don't
mean,
make
this
it
happened
easy.
the other day. A sitting U.S. senator retweeted mis and disinformation about the president having a health crisis that he was not having on Air Force One. This literally
Laura
happened
Loomer,
last
thank
week.
you.
And if you look at it and think this is a sitting United States senator, why would, you know? But
That's
I
exactly
also-
why they would do.
but I
retweet
also-
the information.
No,
It's because
but I do
they're-
think that people carry an expectation that their elected officials shouldn't outright lie to them and tell them things that aren't true. And I will say, the internet is an amazing place for all the reasons that we've pointed out. And also, this new version of Twitter, X, has allowed people to pay to be verified. That was something that, as a person who works in news and was verified so that people could tell that you were a news person, that's concerning. It's concerning that you can be verified as a city official and also just a random person. We just went through a global pandemic. People want to know where to look for the right information. They don't make it easy. And so I would also consider the forum, right? If you're on X, maybe do a Google search that ends in a .gov or .edu or something that you know, or is it on the Times? Is it on NBC? Is it? And I think it's incumbent on you, and it seems unfair, but it is. And I'm sorry that was your experience, because that's horrible.
It's 8 p.m., so I think we have to close up.
Oh my gosh.
But we will.
Time has flown.
Time has flown.
We will sign books.
The good news is, if you didn't get to ask a question, and I'm glad that Emily's here keeping me accountable, because usually someone just says in my ear, "Wrap, it's time to go."
Someone had an alarm. Some very specific person had an alarm that made me look.
Emily had an alarm. But the good news is, if you had a question, you didn't get to ask it of these two amazing, brilliant authors, they will be outside signing books. You can also stay in touch with all of us. We'll give you a quick shout out of our handles. I'm at Ali Vitale on Instagram and on Twitter, but I prefer Instagram.
And Threads.
Threads, yeah.
Yeah. Let's
People are
make
mean there,
Threads
too.
a thing.
And of course, you guys can follow Sammy,
at Sammy,
And
at
I'm
Betches
at
News.
Emily in your phone. And please buy a copy of Democracy in Retrograde for yourself, for your friends, for your entire book club.
And Allie's book, Electable, Why There Hasn't Been a Woman President Yet. And maybe we will, let's just manifest one ASAP.
On that note, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you all.